Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that will truly make you think about how quickly life can turn around, how one decision can change everything, and how sometimes the person you overlook is the very person who could save you when everything falls apart. It was a cold Monday morning in the heart of the city. The towering glass building of Whitmore Technologies stood proudly above the crowded streets. Hundreds of employees walked through its revolving doors every day, but inside those walls, pressure, ambition, and competition ruled everything. At the very top floor of that building sat the CEO, Victoria Whitmore. She was known throughout the industry as a brilliant leader, but also as someone who had little patience for mistakes. Victoria had built the company into a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, and she expected nothing less than perfection from everyone who worked for her. That morning, the office was unusually tense. Employees whispered in hallways. Managers rushed between departments. Something big was happening. Inside a large conference room, several executives sat around a long table reviewing reports. Victoria stood near the window, arms crossed, staring at the city skyline. Then she turned sharply. "We're bleeding money on this project," she said coldly. No one spoke. Her eyes landed on a man sitting quietly near the end of the table. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel wasn't a flashy executive. In fact, most people barely noticed him. He worked as a senior systems engineer in the company's infrastructure division. Quiet, hardworking, and humble, Daniel had been with the company for nearly 8 years, but what most people in that room didn't know was that Daniel had been raising his 6-year-old daughter alone ever since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Every morning before work, Daniel would drop his daughter Lily at school, pack her lunch, and promise her he'd be home in time to read her bedtime story. He never missed a night. But today, Daniel sat silently as Victoria's sharp voice cut through the room. "This entire security system update was your responsibility," she said, sliding a report across the table. "And now we're days behind schedule." Daniel slowly looked up. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "the system isn't behind schedule. It's paused because I discovered a vulnerability in the code that could expose our client database." Victoria frowned. "We don't have time for theoretical problems." "It's not theoretical," Daniel replied. "If we launched the system like this, the company could face a massive breach." A few executives shifted nervously, but Victoria wasn't convinced. "We have investors waiting," she snapped. "Delays cost money." Daniel stayed calm. "I understand that," he said quietly. "But releasing an insecure system could cost the company far more." The room fell silent. Victoria stared at him for several long seconds, then she spoke. "Daniel Carter," she said, her voice cold and final, "you're fired." A wave of shock rippled across the room. Daniel blinked once, as if processing what he'd just heard. "Pack your things and leave the building," Victoria continued. "We'll assign someone else to finish the job." Daniel slowly stood up. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply gathered his laptop and papers. As he walked toward the door, a few coworkers looked at him with sympathy. One manager even whispered, "This isn't right." But Daniel just gave a small nod and kept walking, because Daniel Carter had learned something important through the hardest years of his life. Sometimes the strongest people are the quietest ones in the room. Minutes later, Daniel stepped outside the building into the cold air. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily's school reminding him about the parent meeting later that afternoon. Daniel smiled faintly. "Everything's going to be okay," he whispered to himself, but back inside Whitmore Technologies, everything was about to go very, very wrong. 30 minutes later, alarms started ringing across the company's servers. First, employees thought it was just a routine system glitch, but within minutes, panic spread through the IT department. "Server 3 is down. We're losing database access. Customer files are disappearing." Screens across the office flashed warning messages. Someone rushed into the executive office. "Victoria, we have a serious problem." She looked up sharply. "What kind of problem?" "Our network is under attack." Her stomach tightened. "How bad?" The IT director swallowed. "Very bad." Within minutes, the company's entire infrastructure began collapsing. Files were encrypted, client data was locked, servers went offline one after another. A massive ransomware attack had just hit Whitmore Technologies, and the worst part, the attackers had targeted the exact vulnerability Daniel had warned about. The conference room that had been silent earlier was now filled with chaos. Engineers rushed around trying to isolate the breach, phones rang non-stop, investors started calling, clients demanded answers. Victoria stood in the center of the room, her confident expression slowly fading. "How long until we restore the system?" she demanded. The IT director hesitated. "Honestly, we don't know." Victoria's voice grew sharper. "Then find someone who does." The director looked at her carefully. "There's only one person who fully understood that system." Victoria felt a sudden chill. "Who?" The answer came quietly. "Daniel Carter." The room fell silent again. Victoria's mind raced. The man she had fired less than an hour ago was the only person who knew how to fix the disaster threatening to destroy her company. Outside, Daniel had just picked up Lily from school. She ran into his arms with her usual bright smile. "Daddy." He lifted her up and spun her around. "How was school?" "Good. I drew a picture of us." Daniel smiled warmly. Moments like this were the reason he kept going, no matter how difficult life became. Then his phone started ringing. He looked down. Unknown number. He answered. "Hello?" A nervous voice spoke. "Daniel, it's Mark from Whitmore Tech." Daniel paused. "Yes? We need your help." Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. "What kind of help?" Mark's voice was tense. "The system you warned about, it's under attack. The whole company is going down." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "I tried to warn you." "I know," Mark said quickly. "But Victoria wants to talk to you." Daniel hesitated, then another voice came onto the line. Victoria Whitmore. For the first time since Daniel had known her, she didn't sound confident. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully. "Yes? We need you to come back." Daniel looked down at Lily, who was holding his hand. She looked up at him. "Daddy?" He knelt down. "Sweetheart, Daddy might need to help some people for a little while." She nodded. "Okay." Then she whispered something that made Daniel's heart tighten. "You always help people." Daniel stood again. He took a slow breath. "I'll come," he said, but what happened next would change everything. When Daniel walked back into Whitmore Technologies, the entire office looked like a war zone. Engineers stared at screens filled with error codes, managers argued, phones rang non-stop, and at the center of it all stood Victoria. She looked different now, not powerful, not confident, just worried. When she saw Daniel, she walked toward him. For the first time, her voice softened. "I owe you an apology." Daniel simply nodded. "What's the situation?" he asked. Within seconds he was at a computer terminal. He studied the attack patterns. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. The room watched in silence. After several minutes, Daniel leaned back slightly. "It's worse than I thought." Victoria felt her heart drop. "Can you stop it?" Daniel looked at the screen. "Yes." Hope flashed across the room. "But it's going to take time, and everyone here will have to follow my instructions exactly." Victoria nodded immediately. "You're in charge." And for the next several hours, something incredible happened. The quiet single dad who had been fired that morning became the leader of the entire company's crisis response. He coordinated engineers, rebuilt firewalls, isolated infected servers, and slowly, piece by piece, he took control of the attack. The room held its breath. Finally, Daniel pressed one last command. The screen stabilized. Servers reconnected, client data reappeared, the attack was stopped. The entire office erupted in relief. Some employees even applauded. Victoria stood there silently, staring at the man she had dismissed so easily just hours earlier. She walked over slowly. "Daniel," she said, "you just saved this company." Daniel closed his laptop. "I just did my job." But Victoria shook her head. "No," she said quietly, "you did far more than that." The next morning, Whitmore Technologies released a public statement praising the engineer who had prevented a catastrophic cyber disaster, and inside the company, something even more surprising happened. Victoria called a company-wide meeting. Hundreds of employees gathered. She stepped onto the stage. "I made a serious mistake yesterday," she admitted. The room went silent. "I fired the one person who truly understood our system." Then she looked toward Daniel. "Daniel Carter didn't just return to help us, he saved us." She paused. "And from today forward, he will be leading our entire cybersecurity division." The room burst into applause. Daniel stood there, stunned, but the biggest moment came later that evening. When Daniel arrived home, Lily ran to him again. "Daddy, did you help them?" Daniel smiled and lifted her into his arms. "Yes," he said softly, "I helped them." And sometimes, the most powerful heroes in the world aren't CEOs, they're quiet parents who never stop doing the right thing, because in the end, the person everyone overlooks might be the very one who saves everything. And that's the story for today. If this story inspired you, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that kindness, humility, and perseverance still matter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.